systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy GS Luke here with our round 3 showdown stream for the Open Championship. Going to get you guys ready for all of your exposure with a look at the weather, some strategy for Saturday, any of your questions and deep dives that you've got for me in the live chat, as well as some lineup construction, targeting some optimal contests on DraftKings, really everything you need to make Saturday a good one. So hopefully this weekend or getting into the weekend is treating you guys nicely, and let's get after it for our moving day exposure. And it looks like we already got some sweaty tryhards in the chat. We got Robert D. Kennedy down there as well, Michael Rice, Jonathan Farkas, and also Nick, one of the most sweaty of the sweaty tryhards. Let's get after it. And yeah, any questions, I'll be getting to those a little bit later on. But if you don't have any questions, don't be shy to say hi in the live chat and smash that like button if you guys haven't already as well. But today the golf course played pretty flat between morning and afternoon. We didn't see an obvious weather edge in that forecast. And while I did have a few lineups that I stacked in both directions, a little bit more so towards the PM side, a lot of my exposure was played with 4 2s or 3 3s. And tomorrow it's going to be a similar type of story where I'm not expecting there to be a big differential. But anytime we're playing overseas, especially Northern Ireland or a Scottish golf course like we had from the week before, you want to plan for chaos when you're playing Showdown, especially if you have a 150 max portfolio. If you're going to have that many builds to work with, it's never a bad idea to stack random pockets of tee times just in case we get a weather edge. So with the weather that we're expecting for Saturday, that is probably a wise choice. It's worth noting that the first tee time is at 9:35 local. Because only 70 players made the cuts, they have no need to start at like 6:30 a.m. So they pushed back the start great for us East Coasters. They only have to wake up at 4:35 a.m. To make sure that there's no withdrawals or anything like that. Going to get to quote unquote sleep in compared to a normal days overseas. But this weather edge, because they're starting at 9:30, it looks like consistent weather the entire round. There's some early morning rain, but that's supposed to taper off before they start play. And the wind gusts and sustained winds are almost the exact same the entire day. Now, the morning looks like it's 2 degrees, a little bit lower with the sustained winds. Same thing with the wind gusts, 2 to maybe 3 miles an hour lower than the afternoon. Do we think that's going to matter, though? I would say most likely not. But the morning guys, when you're playing on round 3 Showdown, are also some of the lower owned players that we have on the slate. And, you know, it's not free sums off of both tees. This is a major championship, so it's going to be 2 sums off of 1. These are the players that just hardly made the cuts. And, you know, even your Straka's, your Corey Connors are going to be a little bit lower owned than some of the guys around them. For example, like a Coco is sub 10% owned in my projections. We're going to talk ownership in here in just a minute as well. But in general, the early starters, it's not so much a weather edge that would get you onto those players, but more so the fact that you can get way over the field on guys that are sub 10%. So I'm going to have a lot of those guys mixing in for that reason, not so much because they're getting the better conditions. But the other side of that, of course, is the guys that are teeing off towards the end are the players that have the best form in the field as well. So if you have some later guys mixing in, you don't have to feel guilty about it, as they're going to be playing in very similar conditions to the morning players. It's just that anyone that you're playing that is starting in the last 2-3 hours of tee times is likely to be a little bit higher owned than their counterparts because of how they played over the first 36 holes. So weather, not a big deal. Again, you always want to be tracking this though. And if you're one of the people that's an early morning riser, Nick, probably going to be up before lock, I would imagine. Check the weather just in case, right? Maybe it flips on its head. Maybe it looks a lot more obvious where one half of the tee times is going to get an advantage over the other, but because don't have tee times the whole way until 3:35 at the latest. There's a wide enough window here where, like, if things completely flipped, there could be a weather edge. But with these kind of models, I don't see it right now. So if we go through the GFS, you can see that it's rather consistent after 9 a.m., which, again, they're not starting at 6 a.m., so those lower winds don't really mean anything. This Medio Blue also eerily consistent, actually almost exactly consistent from 9 a.m. onwards. Icon model, same crap, different toilet. And then the UKV at the end over here is also pretty consistent. Now, out of all the different forecasts, I would say that the UKV is maybe the worst in the afternoon compared to some of the other ones. But we have, 4 other models that are telling us the opposite. That's how I'm choosing to play this slate right now. So now that we've got the weather out of the way, let's translate into the ownership component, which is important to talk about before we do any player pool deep dive. So we're going to go through ownership at the top end of the board. And these are my projections. I do have them posted already on my Patreon page. So just keep in mind that the SHIPIT Nation stuff could be a little bit different on these players, but we're going to give you a sense of exactly where the field is coming in on these players to help you make your game theory decisions. And as we just mentioned with those tee times, it's the top end of the leaderboard that's getting that love. So for example, Scottie Scheffler is the highest owned player up top. Today he was in the 25 to 27.5% ownership range, depending on the GPP that you entered. And the reason why he's not going to be 50% plus owned, because based on how he's played, how he's putted at this point, everyone wants to play Scottie Scheffler in their lineups, is what I'm hovering over right here, right? This $13,000 price tag, which is extremely prohibitive. It pretty much means that he can be your only spend up in a lineup. At most, you're probably squeezing in 8, maybe a super low end 9K guy as your second guy in. Whereas if you even just save the $2,100 and go down to Rory, or if you save the nearly $3,000 and go down to a John Rahm as your first man in, you're going to have a lot more flexibility with the rest of your salary. So that's why Scottie Scheffler is not outrageously high owned. In fact, less than 10% higher owned than a Rory. So you could argue that Scottie Scheffler, would be lower owned than he should be, but he is still the highest owned player on the slate. So we have to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. After that, it's a lot of your guys towards the top 5, top 10. Tyrell Hatton in particular looks like the chalk in the 9K range at about 19%. I've got Matt Fitzpatrick a hair over 20% projected owned. And you still have guys like Bryson that I have getting steam personally. Reason for that with Bryson is that he's way underpriced. He's only $9,100. And I think you're going to see enough people look at Bryson 9,100 and click him into lineups because of that, that he's not going to be 10% owned like some other players. But Shane Lowry, even par, he's not getting that kind of steam. A Victor Hovland, a Justin Thomas at -1 aren't getting a whole lot of that steam. It's more so these players that are -2 to -5 or better. So for example, Ludwig Aubert at about 15.5%, which is about Bryson's ownership. So really neither of these two is getting outrageously high owned, kind of taking away from each other and balancing it out, which is nice. But Robert McIntyre at -5 is significantly higher owned than some of the other players around them. And I'm going to cut off the ownership there. Of course, guys, I've got to keep some of it behind the paywall for my Patreon members. But hopefully it gives you an idea for the ownership dynamic, right? That's really what I kind of want to hammer home with this segment, is that the further up the leaderboard that you are, the more likely you are to be chalk. And there will always be exceptions to the rule. There will always be players that are maybe steamed more than they should be, right? Like Bryson with that salary component is an example of where that kind of stuff can happen. But it's a good general guideline to go with as well. So when we're going through the player pool, it's important to note that ownership trend so that we can use it to our advantage when trying to find leverage plays. And I will say you can find these projections on my Patreon page, as I was saying before, but on my X/Twitter, I'm doing a free giveaway for a month access to my Patreon page. And all you have to do is repost it. So simple, super simple stuff, right? Normal stuff for a giveaway, but then also comment on that post. It's on my X/Twitter, who you've got as the low score of the day. So I'm talking about stroke-wise, who has the best rounds for round number 3. If you get the player right, you'll win that free month access, and it'll be a first-come, first-served basis. So I know somebody on there already guessed Shane Lowry. So if you guess that player and you're the first one and they have that low score, you get a free month access to these projections anyway. So a little bit of a giveaway that we can do for the major championship. And also gives you guys a chance to follow my X/Twitter, because I post a lot of extra information on there, not just these live streams that we're doing in between the rounds, but if there's a last second weather shift, I usually tweet that out. So I know a lot of you guys already follow me over there. It's really good for a lot of that information, because these live streams that we do so far ahead of time, there can be a lot of stuff that happens from now until lock that you want to stay on top of. And of course, you've got that giveaway over there as well. So it's GSLukeDFS. That is my handle on X/Twitter. And like I said, enter that giveaway if you guys haven't already. Let's go into the shots gained metrics now. So we're going to use data golf for this, and we got to take this with a grain of salt as well. These major championship weeks, these shots gained providers aren't really good about what they do. At least data golf, if you compare them to the actual Open Championship site, they're not exact on a lot of these players. So for example, if we go to like the shots gained ball striking today, so let me just add that to the table quickly. And then let's go to round 2. Let's sort it by today's round. Bryson DeChambeau with his off the tee play, he's off by like 0.2 strokes. His approach play is off by like 0.2 strokes as well. It does give us a really good general idea of where these players are coming in. But because it's a major championship, we don't have the normal shots gained data that we get from the PGA Tour. It's a little bit wonky on some of these sites. And normally we use Bet the Number for this, but Bet the Number is still loading in that data as we speak. You can see that they're still like on Scotty hole 12 at this point. So I didn't want to use that incomplete data. We're going to use the data golf stuff here that is, like I said, just a little bit off compared to what you have on the Open Championship site. And reason why we're not using the Open Championship site, because those are the exact numbers, is because it's impossible to sort. We'd be here an hour going through them. You'd have to click a new tab just to go to off the tee, a new tab to go to shots gained approach, you name it, right? Every category we'd have to be opening up a new tab. And we can't sort by like ball striking. And when I was looking at the numbers before, I was kind of cross-referencing them. They're off by like 1/10 of a stroke, maybe 2/10 of a stroke in any one category. I'm assuming that it's just like the fringes and that kind of stuff that's throwing it off. Nothing that is going to change the narrative on a player. So we'll be good to use these for tomorrow. So the first thing I do is go to round 2 and I look at these ball striking stats, because like I said from yesterday, we're trying to find the guys that have a good swing, that have good form with how they're hitting the golf ball, because you can translate that from round to round. So a Bryson was number 1 in that category, a Brian Harman as well. They were both positive with the putter, a little bit under a stroke gained for both players, but they did almost all of their damage with the 2 most important categories. So a Bryson, a Brian Harman got a bump up in my projections for tomorrow, players that I was highly considering. A Brian Harman, though, is going to be coming with a lot of ownership at that -8. A Bryson DeChambeau, on the other hand, while he was getting some ownership, he's not going to be the chalk of all the chalk because he's +1 as well. So, some of these guys that are towards the top end of the ball striking list, I won't be on because of that ownership aspect, but some of them that aren't getting that kind of steam, I could be a lot more willing to get to. So Bryson would be an example of that, especially at $9,100. I think he's just an absolute steal for that kind of a slate. Like he should be, I don't know, at least $9,600, $9,700. He's maybe $500 to $1,000 too cheap. You've got Matt Fitzpatrick, Robert McIntyre, Nikolai Højgaard that also grade out well. Unfortunately for those 3, they're all starting in the top 10, so it's not making them unplayable. But if you're going to use a McIntyre, Højgaard, or Fitzpatrick tomorrow, you just got to understand that you're taking them at inflated ownership and that you're going to have to differentiate at some other spot in your lineup. You're not really getting that with one of those players. For example, Fitz, you saw it about 20% in my projections. If Robert McIntyre was just a hair under 20%, and Nikolai Højgaard, though we didn't see him on the projections, is over 10% owned, which in his portion of the board down to the 7K range is significantly higher owned than a lot of the other players around them. So where I like to use these shots gained metrics, a little bit more for a round 3 showdown slate, round 4 showdown, you're going to have to look to the top end of the board. So I'd be using a lot of those guys as conviction play for round 4, even at that ownership. But in round 3 showdown, where placement doesn't matter, I like going to the game theory plays. I mentioned those early starters not really getting the weather edge, but it's more so the fact that they're lower owned that I like. Like a Matty Schmidt, a Corey Connors, they had good ball striking days and lost with the putter. Now we're going to talk about the short game in about a minute or two. Short game can be forgiven because it's a lot more volatile. So they did it with the categories that mattered, and the thing that held them back is the thing that kind of is hit or miss for these players. Give me some Matty Schmidt or Corey Connors going off early. Even a Victor Hovland at T34, it's not like he's going off early, right? He's just in the middle of tee times, but because he's not starting in the top 10, top 15, he's not going to be as steamed as some of the other players around them. Solid ball striking. He did gain 0.17 shots gained putting. So, ball striking a little bit over 3 strokes in those categories makes him, in my opinion, a pretty decent showdown option for round 3. I got a Henrik Stenson there at T51. He also was striping it. He's a pretty good links player as well. But when you start to get down here to like the 2.5 shots gained ball striking range, even the whole way, I would say down to like 1.6, 1.7 shots gained ball striking, I will look at all of these players as potential shots gained ball striking players. And you may have seen towards the right side of that projection sheet before. It was probably cut off though, that I have my player pool tags for what I'm using to get to players. Ball striking stats like this are just one of the different ways that I end up getting to my player pool. So a lot of that kind of cuts off at this like 1.5 shots gained mark. You know, I'm not going to count somebody as a ball striking popper when they only gained 1 stroke in those 2 categories. But these players are going to be a lot more overlooked than the top end of the board. And it's not even like you have to take those T51s, but I know Wyndham Clark, if you could get over the fact that he's like Thor, right? Like his shots gained metrics looked good. A Sebastian Soderberg, right? He gained 2.4 shots gained ball striking, and he's going to be going off early at super low ownership. A Jordan Spieth, I know we had a question about him. We'll save the full deep dive on Spieth, but like he had good ball striking stats. Mark Leishman too. That's where it's really powerful for your process. The guys up top getting a little bit steamed, but not so much when you do some dumpster diving. And then we'll go with the short game stats before we dive into specific players. But with the shots game, short game, I will forgive and forget rather quickly. So if you lost a whole bunch of strokes putting around the green or in both categories, but you were decent with the ball striking stats, those are players that I'll use at super low ownership. And the ball striking poppers can at times be chalky. Those are like the top 5, top 20 guys, the guys that are going to be 10, maybe 20% plus owned. These players, though, the ones that are the short game regression candidates, that's what I call these players in my player pool, are significantly lower owned. In fact, sometimes the lowest owned players that you have on the slate. And while a lot of these players that you can see missed the cut are towards the top, and Nikolai Højgaard would be a short game regression candidate. He was terrific with tee to green play and then lost 2.5 strokes on the greens. That's the kind of stat profile that you'd expect to come around. Matty Schmidt is also a short game regression candidate, lost 2 strokes putting, but was one of those ball striker poppers that we looked at. A Sergio Garcia, he struggled on approach today. He was great off the tee though, so kind of like neutral between those 2 categories. But him losing these 2 strokes putting is something that he's not going to do every day. So if he just cleans that up, and then let's say rather than losing the stroke approach, he can gain the stroke approach, that's a super low round for Sergio. In fact, that could be in like a borderline optimal round for that kind of a play. So that's why I like these short game regression candidates. A John Rahm we could throw in there as well. A Sungjae Im potentially due for some short game regression. Mav McNeely, ball striking wasn't great, but probably not going to lose 1.6 strokes putting every day. And then if we go to the around the green, we can do the same exercise. A lot of these players did miss the weekend, but a Lucas Glover, for example, at T26, he gained a stroke between his off the tee and approach play, which is not a ball striking popper per se, but he was half decent elsewhere. And then he lost 1.7 strokes around the green. This is the kind of player that I'll take a shot on for a bounce back, because at T26, he's not going to be low owned per se, probably about average ownership, but I'll take that on somebody that was a -2 round in round 1. That was one of the best rounds of the day. Lee Westwood could be potentially due for some around the green regression. A Romain Langasque, you could say the same thing about. Hideki Matsuyama, Daniel Berger. You know, I might throw Daniel Berger out of that argument though, because Berger's had a terrible around the green play lately. But that's how we use those shots gained metrics to our advantage. And ball striking popping, short game regression candidates, those are 2 of the player pool tags that I'll use. But I also have high upside players. So those are guys that make a whole lot of birdies or better. If you go to the PGA Tour webpage, take a look at birdie or better percentage. Guys in the top 50 over there are candidates for that. And then also course history, which is limited because we've only played here in 2019 recently. So 1 year sample size. But I'm also looking at links course history. So not just what they've done at Royal Portrush, but also what they've been able to do at other Open Championship venues. So your process, though, should include some of those, all of them, if maybe none of them, but you should have some sort of ways to get onto your player pool so that you can be intentional about who you're using. And there's multiple reasons for that. First off, it's going to clean up your exposure. It's going to make sure that you're not playing people for no reason that are negative EV plays or that are going to hurt you for the next day. And second off, it gives you a way to improve your process. When you know why you're playing people, when you have it drawn out and you have a game plan and I write it out on paper. It's, I do it for content reasons, but I used to do it even before I made content for myself so that I could see what I was thinking. Honestly, I could go to it afterwards and really dive into my decision making and figure out what went well and then what ended up going wrong. When you have a process like this is from my experience over the last few years, it gives you that opportunity to improve. So not only is it going to help you consolidate the pool, be more intentional about who you're using, but it also gives you that second opportunity to learn from it. So make sure that you guys have a process for finding your player pool. And what I mean by using some, all, maybe none of the things that I use to find players is that our process for building our player pool should never be the same, right? Everyone should kind of have their own sort of things that they're looking for in players. A lot of people on the SHIPIT Nation Stone, absolutely nutted tool in terms of researching, by the way. A lot of people will look at round 2 historical. A lot of players out there will also take a look at high birdie percentage players, right? Those are the high upside players I've got. You could look at fescue putting on a week like this. A million different factors that you could use to break down a player pool just to have those delineated, right? Know why you're going to try and get onto players. So that would be my main piece of advice for Showdown. Obviously, the ownership's a big component as well. We're going to incorporate that more so when we build lineups on DraftKings together. But those are a few things to consider for your process in round 3. So let's catch up a chat, go through a few questions, and get this thing going for round number 3. So he said it's easy to look up. I know you're asking about the cut line, so I'm actually going to go to cut sweats real quick so I can bring that up for you. So 1 second, and then I'll share my screen so we can do so. So 6 of 6 percentage wasn't crazy high this week. There was a decent amount of chalk that missed the cut. 6 of 6 percentage was about 15% in most contests. So I guess I take back the not being too crazy. It was a decent 6 of 6 percentage. 5 of 6 percentage was 30 to 35%, though. That is substantially higher than what we're used to seeing. And that 4 of 6 percentage is lower than what we're used to seeing because of the 6 of 6 and 5 of 6 is taking it up. And when you take a look at the different contests, I know you asked about kind of like breaking them down per event. You can see that the double up. So that's this like purple. I don't know what shade of purple that is, but the one that I'm hovering on over here is the cash, the double up. The cash had a lot more success at getting 5 of 6 and 6 of 6s, which normally tells us that the chalk hit that week. A lot of the players up top, maybe a lot of the 5-6K range ended up missing the cut is a lot of times what that's telling us, because in a cash lineup, you're not normally playing slap dicks in the 5K range. You're normally being a little bit more balanced with that kind of lineup construction. And when you take a look at these 6 of 6 percentages, and maybe this is what you were hinting at, Robert, you can learn quite a bit from taking a look at this kind of chart. So something that I do every single week, and hopefully that gives you the information that you were looking for. What is the cut? The cut is +1, and 70 players made it exactly at that number. Can a deep dive Spieth? He said maybe he's shaking off some rust and could be a good birdie maker. I agree with you, man. And the ball striking is the main reason for that. If I could spell his name correctly, it would bring up his stats. He gained over 2 strokes with the ball striking. Again, keep in mind that these stats could be off by like 0.1, 0.2 strokes in either direction, but solid ball striking day, and he didn't carry himself in the 2 short game categories either. So yeah, Jordan Spieth sets up well, especially at a links style course. He's got some of the best links course history that we have in the field, and the ball striking's there on top of it. And at T34, he's not going to be super highly owned. Now, does that mean that Spieth's going to absolutely smash for us tomorrow? No, but I certainly hope that he can. He sets up well stat-wise. He's going to be reasonably owned, in my opinion. So if I had to grade him out as a play, I'd have to give him at least a 7.5 and 8 out of 10, and he's in my player pool for that reason. So yeah, no real complaints, no real pushback on the Jordan Spieth, and as you know, he's my favorite player. So if I can find any reason to squeeze him into my player pool, you know that I'm going to do it. And he said, good Lord, could I have a more scary thumbnail pick? Yeah, it's scary, but it's, I thought it was pretty epic with Matt Fitzpatrick looking at the camera like that. But yeah, scary if you faded him, I guess, right? What's going on? Lori Cantor, he said, how do I feel about fading most of the guys in the top 20, considering pressure of being in a major? Yeah, contending in a major, as you said, can be extremely problematic for newer players. I don't really worry about it with studs or people that have been there before, but like a Haotong Lee and who I love, Chinese SpongeBob, as we call him affectionately, he'd be a prime candidate to suffer from that sort of thing. Now, do I think you have to fade the entire top 20? No, especially the more seasoned players maybe aren't going to be as susceptible to that. But Lee Westwood, he hasn't been in contention in a big boy event in God knows how long. I mean, he's been on Live and he hasn't even contended over there. And we're not going to call those big events compared to what we have here at a major. There are a lot of players like a Riggs Johnston too. I love the talent. He's been a popper on the DP World Tour at times, but he's only shown up like once or twice in events on the DP World Tour. So it's hard to believe that he's going to keep it up for all 4 rounds at a major championship. So I think in isolated cases that it would be a great idea to stay away from the inexperienced, but not so much like a Scotty Scheffler, for example. Like, you wouldn't fade him for that reason. And I can see that he's your profile picture. So you probably already knew that about the GOATs. He said he took down the $5 single entry today. I said, thanks for my insight. Of course, Titan. And that's exactly what I like to hear. I wish I would have seen your comment earlier. I would have highlighted it for you. But good stuff. And let's try and go back to back. The only thing better than a bink is doing it in back-to-back days. What's going on? Michael said, thanks for all that I do. I appreciate you and your kind comment, my dude. What's going on? Deacon says, what's going on? Just sipping on my coffee, talking some golf. So having an absolute ball. And he said, good to see you. And he said that cut line moving to 2-1 over killed your single entry. Yeah, there's a few guys at +2 that I had in there as well. Ben Griffin, mostly Ben Griffin. He was the big one for me. But there were a couple other guys I had in like 10% of lineups at that +2. My 6 of 6 rate would have been like 3x what it was at +1. But I take solace in the fact that the 6 of 6 rate moved a little bit for the field as well. So I think I was impacted a little bit more than most players. But hey, that's why we've got Showdown for the next few days, right? If we don't have as many 6 of 6s as some other people, we can still kill them for Saturday and Sunday. What's going on? I said deep dive on Jon Rahm. So Rahm suffered from some short game problems today. So he's a short game regression candidate for me and somebody that I'm playing. He gained 1.3 strokes approach, was okay off the tee, lost a little there. Needs to be better if he's going to shoot a nuke round. But overall, this stat profile is far from terrible. And the one category that held him back from having, a -1, a -2 day is the kind of category that flips oftentimes from round to round. So I'm okay with Jon Rahm. I'll chalk it up to just maybe not having that much luck on the greens. And that's what you'll hear from players a lot of times after that sort of a day. Let's see what's next. We got Hideki deep dive. Let's do that one. So Hideki had a much better round 2 than round 1, but he was a little putter dependent for my liking. You can see gaining just under 2 strokes with the putter. Ball striking, though, it must be worth noting, he gained just under 2 strokes in between those two categories. So, I would say overall that he's like a 6 out of 10 stat profile. I like the ball striking stats, but the fact that the putter got hot and he's not usually a very consistent putter makes me worried about what happens if he can't gain those 2 strokes on the greens. Because if we take a look at the rest of the categories, right, he's just like a slightly above average player, which won't kill you and won't kill your lineup shooting like, I don't know, even or -1 tomorrow. But we want guys that can get to that -5, -6 number, which has me playing a few guys around him just a little bit more. But I do think he's an option for sure. In fact, I just want to double check something on Hideki so I don't quote something that's incorrect. Let's see if I have him. I do have him in my lineup. So like, even though I don't love the stat profile, I've got him at half the ownership of a Chris Goddard. I've got him half as owned as a Keegan Bradley, a Højgaard, a Brian Harman. That makes up for it in some cases, especially in those large field GPPs. You don't even have to set an alarm. Yeah, lucky you, man. I definitely do. I'm not waking up at 4:20 most days. Deep dive on Soderberg and Saturday. God damn you, pointing out Soderberg. I was hoping that we'd get him at low ownership, but gladly. I mean, he gained over 2 strokes ball striking. I loved that. And then he lost strokes. In fact, about a stroke in the short game categories. This is the exact kind of stat profile that I'm looking for in a low-owned popper. And that's exactly what you have on Soderberg. He's cheap and not a lot of people are getting there. So he's in my GPP pool as a low-owned flyer play that I'm mixing in. And then you had Saturday as well. So I'm not as high on him because of these ball striking stats. He did lose 1.5 strokes on approach and was also a little bit putter dependent, but no one's going to use him. So the ownership component is the exact same as Soderberg. It's not going to be over 2-3% owned, probably sub 1% owned, I would say. Let's go sub 2% owned in most GPPs, which gives you a bunch of opportunity to get different to the field. So if you have a hot take on Saturday, maybe you notice on the DP World Tour, because I know you follow that tour more than just about anyone watching this. If you notice that he's a round 3 popper, then like you could still use him, right? Even with those shots gain metrics, because 1 round's results are never the end all be all. What's going on, Alex Smith? We got former 49ers quarterback in the chat, huh? I'm just kidding, but you said you're feeling a lot of regret fading Scotty. Yeah, me too, man. I don't have him in my main slate lineup, so it's gonna be a lot of round 3 and round 4 showdown for yours truly. It's a good day here, 5th in a single entry, and you'll take it. Yeah, decent day for showdown as well. That's what I love about showdown. I play it about the same kind of exposure that I do for main slate, maybe slightly less compared to main slate. Is if you have 1 or 2 good showdown days, then you're pretty much riding on just the house at that point, right? You're playing with house money, not having to worry about it. We're pretty close to that point. So if we have another good round 3 showdown, we'll be into the profit and be able to say that for the final day. You lost your last second changes from Hall to Penge was a big whoopsie. Yeah, not the best, but hey, don't kill yourself too much about that, Chris. We all have regret, and hindsight's 20/20 after the fact. So if your process was the reason why you made that sort of a change, I wouldn't be too down about it. Just keep in mind, keep it in the back of your head, but I wouldn't overreact to one sort of result. Team Old Guy with Phil, Henrik, and Westwood all together. They're playing not in the same group, right? Because it's twosomes, but they're at the same portion. That's crazy. And you got 3 live guys as well. It's crazy how Neiman missed the cut. Bryson almost missed the cut from live, but you had Team Old Guy getting towards the top end of the board. Kind of cool to see. Can I go over McIlroy's ball striking stats? For sure, Deacon. That's exactly why we're here. So good old Rory McIlroy. He gained off the tee. He gained on approach about 2 strokes ball striking, and he gained a stroke putting, which, that's not a big deal, right? It's not like he gained 2 to 3 strokes putting where it seems unsustainable. A stroke gained is rather reasonable for a player of Rory's caliber. This stat profile, 6.5 out of 10. It's not overly exciting, but it is a lot better than most players. And I might even have to up that up to a 7 out of 10. Just because, he lost around the green, but he's a stout short game player. Like, that just does not worry me. You're convinced that Schmidt and Thirsty Lawrence are still due for a big round. I think I agree with you on that one. Is that could we get a shots gained plus possible regression on those? So yeah, I actually like both of those guys. I'm using both in my player pool, Schmidt and Thurston Lawrence. Matty Schmidt, he had the ball striking stats going for him. He also lost those 2 strokes putting. So he's like the poster child when we're looking for regression. And then Thurston Lawrence as well. He gained putting, but he lost on approach. At least if you're a shots gained truther, if you're trying to choose between those 2 players, Matty Schmidt would be the better of the 2 options. And then, however, it's worth noting with a Thurston Lawrence is because he's really good at link style golf courses. He's a high birdie percentage player. Like, he's somebody that I grade out extremely well at this sort of golf course and that I'm using as well. So it's kind of like choosing between my 2 favorite children there, but it's for 2 different reasons, right? Lawrence is a little bit lower owned than the other side of it, and maybe a little bit more of a high upside play as well. Like, I could see him going for a super low round. You said use paper, I say. Yeah, that's a good way to do it. If you're not somebody that's a spreadsheet heavy, using a pen and paper like Nick does always gets the job done. Should we be worried about a letdown round from Twitchy Harmon or Hot Tongue Lee? Yeah, probably. Hot Tongue Lee, never heard of that one before. Chinese SpongeBob is my nickname for him. I would say that he could be dealing with some nerves. Harmon, yeah, he looks nervy when we see him in contention, but he did stare down the field at the Open Championship at Hoylake and win. So, he's got a track record going both ways. He's looked twitchy, he's failed before, but he's also gotten the job done as well. Can I find the high birdie percentage players on the PGA website? Yeah, so I guess I'll show you that, Akeem, right? You might be newer here. I've shown it a few times before, but I'm always willing to show a newbie how to find some of these stats. So we're just going to go from the PGA Tour front page so I can show you this real quick. So if we go to pgatour.com, that's what I went to here. You click stats at the top. Next, you click on scoring, and then you scroll down the birdie or better percentage, a lot of like the main stats, and you click on like around the green. The main ones will be up top. Approach, the main ones like green and regulation percentage will be up top. For whatever reason, birdie percentage isn't one of the main scoring stats, even though it should. But if we click birdie or better percentage over here towards the right side, you can see it for the entire season. So Justin Thomas, number 1, Sepp Straka, number 2. Like, I'm playing Sepp for his high upside. I'm playing a Justin Thomas because he's a high upside player. You can take a look at the top 25, top 50 players on tour and use that to your advantage. Now, should you be playing every single one? Probably not, because that would be pretty much your entire player pool if you were only using high upside players. But if you can find low owned ones, then maybe you want to think about adding them to the player pool. So yeah, that's how you find that. And hopefully that answers that question for you. Let me get a sip of this. I said I sort of answered this on another golfer, But when looking for short game regression, you assume that I pay attention to players that had atypical results one way or another. Yes. And it's not just right the atypical result that gets me onto them, is I also want to look at their ball striking stats as well. So, if let's say they had 3-4 shots gained lost in one of those two categories, I'd say 2+ lost strokes in any one category, even combined around the green plus putting, is normally what I qualify for that. But then I have to look at their ball striking stats and see if they were at least half decent. And by half decent, I mean like a neutral or better. If they were about a 0 between the two categories, I'll take them for some short game regression. Lane Gask, deep dive. You said you love the content. Thank you, man, for that. Yeah, Lane Gask, good on link style golf, but the shots gained metrics aren't otherworldly. He did gain 1.6 strokes off the tee and was a neutral, if not a negative, in the other three categories. So shots gained profile, we'd have to put it like a 4 out of 10, maybe even a 3.5 out of 10. Not the best, but not the worst shots gained profile either. And with some of that links in course history, I don't think he's the worst play. And yeah, Thurston Lawrence, we just did a little bit of a deep dive on him as well. A little bit too short game dependent for myself. How do I like English or Hatton is playing to possibly win outright? So yeah, you're looking at them to win this thing. So both of them are in contention, so you got to like where they're starting. I'm assuming that you've looked on the odds and that you've vetted them and thought that they were decent on both of those players. So let's just go to the stats. I'm making that assumption for you, though. So let's go to Tyrell Hatton. At this stage of the weekend, we're going to look at the entire event since we're evaluating an outright, which will be over the next 2 rounds. So Tyrell Hatton, 3 strokes gained to ball striking. He's also gaining about 1.5 with the putter. And then let's go to Harris English. Harris English, 2.5 strokes approach. That's nice. And then about 1.5 with the putter. It's close to 50-50. So I would say, I'm assuming that Harris is going to have the better odds, right? The longer shot odds, I should say, between those two players. He's at -5. What is Hatton at? Is he also -5? So yeah, Tyrell Hatton's at that same score. If the odds were the same, I'd rather have Tyrell Hatton. If the odds are higher on English, like they probably should be, I would bet English between those two players. So kind of depends on the number that you're getting because both set up really well from the stat perspective. Non-DFS question, but curious to who I think hoists the trophy. I think Scotty Scheffler does, man. I said to a few of my buddies, I said to my stepdad, my mom, that I think that the engraver should already start engraving his name on the trophy. I hate to say that it's already over at this point, but if he's going to gain strokes putting now on fescue, I said it actually on my course breakdown. I think I even mentioned it on my DFS stream that we did on Wednesday. If he gains strokes on fescue putting, he wins this thing every single time. There's no if, and, or buts about it. His ball striking profile is perfect for link style golf. It is the quintessential course fit for link style golf. Nobody has ever contended that. And he's said so himself that he loves the shot making. He loves hitting the ball low, right? He's willing to make those sort of shots. The issue's always been is that he sucked on fescue greens. So I think he's going to win if he's even a neutral with the putter for the next few rounds. But if he gains strokes putting for the next few rounds, I think he wins by 3+, maybe 5+. Like we had at the PGA Championship. I think it's his to lose. If I were a book, I'd have him at even money to win this thing at this point. And I have 0% in my main slate lineups, which is why I'm already like on to round 3 and 4 showdown, because I've almost like mentally just like gone over the fact that he's probably going to win this golf tournament. So I'm glad, by the way, that my outrights this week I took in the non-Scotty and Rory market. So if one of those two wins, I don't have to worry about it. So yeah, Scotty though, probably hoisting the trophy, man. I'd really have to think that he wins this thing. Thoughts on the lesser-known DP World Tour guys going to be lower owned? I like them, especially for somebody like yourself, Nick, that is familiar with those players. But if you're somebody, let's say, that's newer to DFS golf or that doesn't follow the DP World Tour, then you probably shouldn't be using those sort of guys. Only if you have some knowledge on to their kind of skill set. And really, you want high upside ones, Nick. If they don't look good with the shots gained metrics, if they're not popping there, you want the ones that are aggressive, long off the tee, good putters. And I know me and you know a lot of those players. We talk about them a lot. Those would be the ones that you want to use. But if you're not familiar with that side of things, I don't think that you have to play those guys. There's enough PGA Tour players towards the bottom to use that you don't have to take a dabble on those players. But they will be super low owned. And hey, if you have that sort of knowledge, then take advantage of it. That's always what I say about that. You said you agree that Scheffler wins. Yeah, man, he's so good. He's just, I call him the GOAT at this point. I know it's premature, but he's playing like one of the GOATs. He's playing like Nicklaus and Tiger did. And I'll be the first to say it. He looks an awfully lot like those two. Hey, brother, did I do a deep dive on Novak? We did not, so we can do one right now. So Novak Nation, as I'm sure as Tambo in a hoop say all the time, he was about a neutral overall for the events. But if we zoom in on round 2, which is really what we're going to look at for round 3 showdown, lost on approach, which wasn't great, but he was able to gain off the tee. And then the short game was hit or miss. So this is a 5 out of 10 stat profile. I mean, everything that's good is being kind of like canceled out by another category that's into the negative. So nothing that we're really learning from the stat profile here. But at T51, you're looking at below average ownership. So if you like his round 3 historical, maybe you like the fact that he makes a lot of birdies or something. He doesn't make a lot of birdies. I just want to throw that out there. But like, let's say that you had something like that, right? That was getting you onto an Andrew Novak, then you could still make him a play because he's going to be lower owned. But the shot gain metrics, not necessarily a reason I would say for that. Thoughts on Sanjay? Sanjay had good ball striking today, so kind of surprising because his form, especially on approach, has been utterly terrible for the last 3 months, but he gained 1.4 strokes on approach, and in round 1, he gained 2 strokes on approach. So if Sanjay M's going to be gaining with the iron play, watch out because that has been the main issue for Sanjay M. In fact, just to show you this, if we go to the last 25 events he's had, this is the approach profile for Sanjay. Literally all losses, 1 gain, and it was 0.15 strokes. Him gaining over 1.4 shots gained per round at this point, what is it, 1.66 over the 2 rounds? It's pretty monumental stuff. So I like Sanjay. I'm using him in some lineups, and I hope it's not fool's gold. I hope we can keep it going. He said, pretty mean of Scotty to go to Rory's home and spank him. I saw some AI-generated thing of Rory today on Instagram where he was talking about Scotty being a felon and that he was going to spank him, that he was going to put him 6 feet under for walking on the Irish homeland. Just absolutely out-of-pocket stuff, AI-generated, dangerous shit. I'm sure some old watching on Instagram thought it was real or something. It was, yeah, pretty mean of Scotty to do that. And that's why the person made the reel too. He was Rory all pissed at Scotty Scheffler. Only if that was real, that would just make it that much funnier. But next, we're going to go on to the strategy side of things, and we're going to real quickly look at the contests that are available, which are pretty much the same size as what we had for round 2. So, for example, the Sand Trap is still 300K. My issue with it is that it's 33% to first place. So just way too top heavy if you're looking for a sustainable contest. The Drive the Green, though, is a 7th to first place, so it is a $10,000 to first. But because this is bigger than most of the Drive the Greens are, usually it's like a 40K, 50K prize pool where like $10,000 is like way too big, just like you had for the Sand Trap. But now, because it's only a 7th to first place, it is much more manageable from that perspective and not nearly as top heavy. So you could take a look at the Drive the Green. I think it's a lot more fair. You have the Long Drive. So this is a $100 single entry. It is a 6th to first place, which still not the 10th to first. That is an ideal payout structure when we can get 10% to first place. But a 6th to first place is a whole lot better than a 3rd or a 4th like you see in a lot of these other contests. For example, this one is a 5th to first place. Not terrible, but not as good as a 6th and a 7th like you had for some of those other two. And outside of a few of the contests that we've already shown to have pretty decent payout structures, a lot of them are going to be your single entry. So for example, this dog leg is about 12% to first place. If you try and find the Albatross, that is the $12 single entry. Let's see if we can find that one. I probably scrolled past it, but that's another one where it's a 10% to first place, as you can see right there. The reason why that's important is the rest of your top 5, top 10, you're going to get that flatter payout structure. And for a good, maybe not great lineup, you're still going to get paid out on that sort of thing. So check out the flatter payout structures. And if you're going to enter the large field GPPs, so like the big $5 or $25, either max enter them or enter at least 50 entries. You don't want to be going up against 150 entries with 1 to 5 entries. You'd be much better off, like for example, if you're taking 5 entries into this $25, taking that $125 and entering a few single entries instead. So that's the contest selection component. And it's mostly just about entering contests that are set up the best payout wise. And then next up, we've got lineup construction, which we've talked a lot about at this point. We've talked about ownership, balancing it, right? Trying to get leverage in when you're playing pieces of chalk. But let's actually show you that in practice now. So this is going to be for like the big $5 or $25 GPP, building a lineup and giving you guys an idea of exactly what I'm thinking about when I'm plugging in players. So towards the top end of the board, I mean, we could choose to play some chalk if we wanted to. It's worth noting that though there are a few players towards the top that are getting some extra steam, that everyone was still getting ownership in the 9 and 10K range, like at least like 9-10% at the very least. So if we want to get cute towards the top, we can, but we also don't have to. So I'm going to throw in a Rory who still has some ownership, but I just like the projection. I like the way that he's playing. I like the way that he sets up now that he's not near the lead. Like, he's far enough back at this point that he's not really going to be feeling the pressure. Now, if he has a low round, he shoots like -5, -6 tomorrow, then he might be feeling the pressure heading into Sunday. So I'm going to throw in a Rory now. He doesn't have to worry with that mental component and any sort of choking yet. So I like that. He's $11,000, so a little expensive, but we can still take another 9K guy if we want to. In fact, I'm going to go to a Bryson DeChambeau, who in theory might be looked at as a leverage play by some because he's at T51. But keep in mind before that I had him closer to 15% owned, so I really don't think we're getting that different by using him. Let's throw in a Jordan Spieth with his ball striking stats, also not going to be chalky at T34. Let's throw in who else in this range? I actually don't like the middle end of the 7K range that much. So let's be a little bit more aggressive with the salary. It's actually go to the 8K range as either another 3rd/4th man in. We could get Justin Rose if we want to, who Rose is getting some ownership. So we've got Rory with some ownership, Justin Rose with some ownership. And then even though DeChambeau and Spieth aren't towards the top end of the board, they're not going to necessarily be low owned either, just going to be like averagely owned compared to some of the other players around them. So for our last two players, again, this is for the big $5 or $25 GPP, we've got to be very intentional about getting our leverage in. We've got to try and find a way to get different to the rest of the field and make sure we're not going to duplicate ourselves, and make sure that when we hit on our players, especially these last two, that we can make it count and vault up those leaderboards over our competition. So we're not going to be looking at guys under par. Like a Jordan Smith immediately kind of gets rolled out. Like even a Fowler Glover, I don't love because they're going to be getting slightly more steam. It's more so guys like a Dietrich that I'd be looking to in that situation, who he's a short game regression candidate, I believe. Let me actually double check on what I had for him. I know he's in my player pool, but I just want to see exactly what tag I had him as. 1 second here. Actually, yeah, short game regression is what I had on Thomas Dietrich. So let's throw him in there. And then for your last man in, DraftKings does frown upon building complete lineups, but let's say you went with a Schmidt, a Lane Gask, maybe you left some salary on the table and he went down to like, I don't know, a Matthew Jordan at $6,700 with his course history on links courses. Any of those players, as long as they're not overly owned, really anyone but Lee Westwood, Rasmus Højgaard, who you can see at -3, -5, they're starting in the top 12. They're going to be getting some extra steam outside of like those two players. The rest that are in that average to below average ownership range are going to give you enough differentiation that you can enter this pretty much regardless of contest. You know, the big $5, $25, that's where you have to think about ownership the most. In a single entry, something like $100, maybe it's the $33 or $12 single entry that we were going through before. Any of those, you have to think even less about the ownership. In fact, let's say towards the top, like rather than a Bryson, you don't want to be as bold about it. And you go, you know what? I'm going to stick to playing Fitzpatrick chalk because the ball striking stats look great, which by the way, they do on Matt Fitzpatrick. So like, I think that is a perfectly valid take. Now, am I playing Matt Fitzpatrick? No, I'm not. I'm fading him at that ownership because I have so much exposure in my large field GPP lineups. But if you were in a single entry, this would be a totally valid build pretty much no matter who you'd use at $6,600, because you don't have to be as different in those smaller field contests. And it's real easy to think about. If you're only trying to beat a couple hundred people or maybe 1,000 entries, as opposed to the 14,000 that we have in here, you don't have to get as much differentiation to make sure you don't duplicate yourself. And you don't have to have as much differentiation to vault up the boards, right? Because there's less people that you have to pass. So that's the lineup construction segment, putting it all together. It's just finding the fine balance between too much chalk and not enough chalk, and then also catering that to the kind of contests that you're entering as well. But that's all I've got, guys, for the round 3 live stream. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Also subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss the round 4 stream, which would be tomorrow night, covering everything you guys need for that Sunday showdown, which is a little bit different than rounds 2 and 3. We're still going to go through shots gained metrics, still going to talk about weather, all that jazz, but placement points, the strategy of getting the top 5, top 10 right becomes extremely important for round number 4. So we'll touch on exactly how that changes for the final round. Also, guys, for all the prop and betting content for round number 4, we're going to be doing a live stream on my YouTube channel, that is GSLukeDFS, at 8 p.m. Eastern time, touching on everything from that perspective. So that's underdog prize picks, matchups on the sports books. We're going to go through course conditions, stat averages, also pin locations and hole by hole, giving an idea of exactly how this golf course is going to play to help you find an edge edge for some of those prop sites and pick 'em. So make sure to check that out a little bit later on this evening. Again, a little bit over an hour from now, 8 p.m. Eastern on my YouTube channel. And as I mentioned earlier as well, on my X/Twitter, GSLukeDFS, enter that giveaway. All you have to do is comment on there who you think has the low score of the day. And if you're the first player to comment that player on that post, it's by the way, it's the post with me posting my projections on there and promoting them. You do so, you get that right, you will get a free month access to that. So by the way, the day before, I forget the guy's name, I think it was Bleedo. Bleedo, by the way, is somebody that is always in the live chats, always watching them after the fact. I know one of the more sweaty tryhards that we have in the community. He's the one that won for round number 2. So I sent you a comment. I told you to DM me over there. If you're watching this and you haven't already done so, Bleedo, do so I can get you that free month. Enter that, guys. I'll see you guys for the prop and betting live stream a little bit later on, and let's have ourselves a Saturday. But let's see, last second questions. It looks like we're good. Ernie, a little late, but better to have you late than never. Let's have ourselves a Saturday, guys.